Okay, I'd like to make a few comments, give you a little information on this Owens coin in a ball of wool box that I recently had in my shop for repairs. Now, there were a number of problems with it. The overall finish was very blotchy and kind of shot. There's a bad scratch in the front here. The worst thing was right along here. This wood was all torn up and had been epoxied where this little piece comes down to form the lock like this. So I ended up just cutting off this entire piece of wood, which you can't see from a lot of angles, but maybe you'll be able to see it from yours. The other thing that I wanted to discuss for a little bit is back here, there's a crack. You may not be able to see it, but it had been repaired before also, so I re-glued it. And I'd like to discuss the cause of that because I've seen it in a number of items, the Dean's box, 2 Milson Worth die boxes that I had in my shop. So when you open a lid like this, the center of gravity is right here. When it comes down like this, the back of the lid is going to impact the side of the box, and when that happens, all the weight is now transferred to these screws here and these hinges. And I don't even like to leave it like that, but a lot of people, as they're performing a trick, may just throw this back in sort of a flourish or something. And what happens is that you have a moment arm here from this mass times its acceleration over this distance, and it's being resisted by a moment arm of these screws here that's perhaps 1/4 of an inch. So that puts a tremendous load on these screws. And what happens is something gives somewhere. Now, it may break along here as it did in this case. The screws might become loose, or the damage might occur in the top itself. Now, in order for this to look nice, and I think this is the proper way to do it, the grain is aligned this way. That means you have no edge grain here, you have the side grain, which looks nicer. But the problem is that wood does not have the same strength in both directions due to its grain. The grain is sometimes described as a bunch of tubes or straws that are together like this. So it's fairly easy, or relatively easy, to break the wood in this direction when it's aligned like this, but it's very difficult to break it in this direction. So those karate guys kind of take advantage of this. They have a piece of pine. If they hit it like this, it's going to break because the grain is running this way and it breaks along that grain. If they were to take that same board and hold it at the end and try to break it this way, they probably damage their hand or their foot a lot more than would be apparent on one of those shows. Anyway, when that happens, because of that, you've got a weakened plane along here where these screws are inserted along here. These screws are not clocked because I just get them in as far as I can get them. And you don't have very great thickness to put the screws in because you're limited here, or else obviously the screw is going to pop up through the top. Same thing in the back here. Now, if the hinge was made so that instead of being this design, you could have taken one of the leaves of the hinge and screwed it in this way. Not as attractive for sure, but stronger at least along here. And I've seen on the die boxes these tops broke off because this piece back here cracked, then the screws fell out, and then the lid fell out. In one case, one of the lids was actually lost. So don't do this and then just let it catch on its own weight. And this applies to any magic trick that you're doing. If you had I wouldn't advise it on something this small, but if you had a chain that went from here to here, as you see sometimes on a trunk or something, then this would be fine to just come back and get resisted by the chain, which eventually would pull out probably, but at least the box would be intact. Now here you have these 2 screws, and they're only have this thickness to go through, And the screws that I took out of here were very short, so I kind of doubt that they were original because all the other screws are longer. So I put a little bit longer screws in. But the issue is that once you put this down and you lock this, you're creating a situation where all the weight of the, let me get this in here correctly, all the weight of the box itself plus whatever's inside, which in this case is another box, ball of wool, etc. It's all being held when you lift it like this by those two little screws. So you've transferred all this weight, and there's moment arms involved here too, and that's all here. So I think when you handle these, if you're going to perform it, or even if you're just showing it to your friends, you want to just lift it up for a little bit and then get some support underneath it, or you could obviously lift it from the sides like this or something. So I would be careful about that with any box that you have, not to throw the lid back, or if you're going to let the lid rest in that backward position, to put it down very, very gently, because sooner or later you're going to break something. So in this case, the lid forces caused the back of this to crack and become loose, and in this case just the weight of this pulled those little screws out at some point, and then eventually that led to the breaking of the wood in here, and so it needed to be replaced. There's a really deep scratch, and so I filled that with a hard wax, so get it at the right angle. I'm sure you can see it, but I think it's pretty good. You don't really notice it. So I'm not very good at taking before pictures, but you just have to take my word for it that this looked pretty shabby when it came in the shop, and I think it looks pretty good now, and with careful handling it'll, last forever. There you go. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the other failures that came through my shop. This is a Milsonworth large die box. These are beautiful. I think this is the most beautiful design I've seen. It does have some problems. It's made with piano hinges, and those were attached at the back and just blew the top apart. So that had to be rebuilt. There weren't any pieces missing, and also there's a problem that you can't get the die out by sliding it out the front because of the way the piano hinges align. But having said all that, it's a beautiful thing. This is a small orange die box that came through. It was all falling apart. I repainted everything, but it has these kind of strap hinges on the side, which I like, but they were pins, so I replaced them with screws, and I don't think it'll ever come apart again. This is a small Milsonworth die box, another very pretty die box. It had lost the lid on the left side, again made with piano hinges. They worked loose, or they broke the wood off, and you can see by the way the grain is running that it's susceptible to that. So I replaced it the way it had been made. I found a piece of walnut with grain that was very close to what they had there originally, and I was able to get that back on there. I think this one came out really nice. We'll see in a second. The top on the left with the different color. Now, it hasn't been stained or anything, so I stained it, and then I used some techniques with sprays and things to match the colors up. And I was also able to refurbish the die itself, as well as the little door handle, door pulls that were on there. So it's a very cute little die box. I like it a lot. There it is in its finished state. I think it looks pretty good. Okay, I think the last thing that we have to see here is original Dean's box that I had, and that has strap hinges, which I think is a good idea. You can see by the direction of the grain, it really gets you away from the problems that the other ones had. However, because the lid was thrown back, the hinges blew apart right at the knuckle there, and those knuckles opened up. Now this has got new hinges on it that I put on it. They're about twice as thick as the original, but I think this is a very good way to do it, actually. I notice Lupe's replaced these kinds of hinges with butt hinges on the one she's making. This little door has the original hinge. I was able to kind of, I don't know, massage that thing back into place. But the new ones are thick. You can't see it well on this picture because I tried to fix those hinges that had blown apart, so I put them back together. But those knuckles were completely separated, completely opened up. The pins were lost. It just couldn't take the stress. There you have it.